I guess we probably should ask some football questions. And Deshaun is coming back to practice as of today or tomorrow? Today?
Yesterday.
Yesterday. We are on the cutting edge of the news right here.
He's back in the building.
Okay, he's back in the building.
He's been in the building. He's been in the building.
He's allowed to practice, yes.
Like I said, we know everything that's going on. Come here for all your information. Regardless, our question that we were asked was how should we be splitting these snaps right now in practice between Jacoby and Watson, knowing that we've got a couple more weeks of Jacoby out there, but we got to get Watson ready. What do you think? What say you?
Well, I think that the Browns had a plan for this clearly in camp, which seemed to make a lot of sense, and it's likely something that they'll do again. But, in theory, why couldn't Deshaun Watson just run the look team? Why couldn't he just take every single snap against the defense? He could be the scout team quarterback just to sort of work the rust off. And I think we heard Kevin Stefanski say that his priority right now is getting Jacoby Brissett ready because, again, there are still 2 key games to play, Week 11, Week 12, before Deshaun Watson makes his debut. And the Browns haven't really left any margin for error, as it feels like we've been talking about for well over a month right now. So, again, the priority is Jacoby. The Browns have to win. The priority is winning. The only way they can win right now is with Jacoby Brissett at quarterback because Deshaun Watson obviously can't play quarterback. So you need to get Brissett ready for quarterback for now, ready to play quarterback now, and worry about 2 weeks from now, a little bit closer to 2 weeks from now. So I don't think that there's really a question here. I just used a lot of words. That was word salad. Sorry.
That's all right.
I would
Very
still
logical,
give Jacoby Brissett the majority of the first team reps, and why not have Deshaun Watson run the look team reps just to get reps?
Aditi, does your eye test tell you that there's been any quit to this team, or do you think they're still giving max effort?
I don't see quit, and I think that the other piece here, the same way that everybody's kind of on tenterhook. I mean, we said this early, right? We said this isn't a team that could afford to just sit and wait for Deshaun Watson to show up and suddenly save the day. And let's be very reasonable about whatever the expectations are according to Deshaun Watson. We know that there are people in the league, including the Cleveland Browns, who believe that his skill set is that of a top 5 quarterback. We also know that there are some scouts and general managers who didn't view him that way. Regardless, this is a young man that hasn't played football in a very, very, very long time. So now all of a sudden, do you expect him to just jump in there and rattle off wins week 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18? Just go 6-0 to close the season? I think that there has to be an expectation that he's not going to be a Hall of Fame quarterback in his very first drive in Houston 2 weeks from now. And so you need more pick me up from the rest of the team, for lack of a better phrase. And I think that having said all of that, even though we're cautioning, let's be reasonable, and we're cautioning, what can you expect? I think that this is a team that's probably thinking, hey, we're getting an elite, potentially top 5 quarterback in 2 weeks. And so I think there's a boost to that. And I also think that as we keep saying, and as Adam and I have kind of argued for the last few weeks, you can't really count yourself out until you're out. Look at what just happened this past weekend. I mean, if you ask me going into the weekend, and probably if you ask me right now, who do I think are the 2 most complete teams in the NFC? I would say the Eagles. In the AFC, I would say the Bills, and they both just lost. So again, no one is really mathematically out of this thing just yet. There really, truly, genuinely is parity.
What do you think has been to you the most disappointing thing about the season so far?
The losses?
The defense. No, what aspect of it?
That's it. Yeah, like sometimes
isn't the defense the answer to that? We
you know what?
talked about this as a
think
potential top defense in the league.
Yeah, I mean, for sure. I certainly spent training camp saying that this is a defense that last year finished top 5, had set as a goal number 1 for the season, and I fully expected it to be a top 5 defense. There's certainly been disappointment in that. But I think the big thing that we've learned this season, and I saw the Vikings on Sunday. The Vikings are a team that are sitting with 1 loss. They're what? They're 7-1, 8-1.
I think they're 8-1.
Yeah, and so their last 7 wins. So 7 wins in a row by a touchdown or less, a score or less. what do you look at there and think, wow, this is a dominant team? It's not that offensive line.
No,
It's
but they
not
win.
that
They make
chain
plays
where
when they have to, though.
quarterback.
They
Yeah,
win
well,
close
and
games.
again, exactly, because it's a team that has somehow found a way to gut out wins. So for me, it's hard to look at the Browns and isolate any one thing and say, oh, the defense has been disappointing, or oh, Jacoby Brissett has been disappointing, or oh, anything that you can mention. I don't want to just single out anybody. It's just kind of a team as a whole. I know it's a young team, but it's also a team that has some seasoned veterans that you would think know how to gut out wins and know how to keep their cool at the end of games and know how to close and finish. And so in a year when you're seeing teams figure out how to win, I think just the fact that the Browns somehow haven't been able to is disappointing, especially after the way they started the season. Week 1, they somehow, in some crazy fashion, on the foot of their rookie kicker, won this great game. And then ever since then, it's kind of been what's going on.
Yeah, Dee,
It's the up and down. That all is really
I
disappointing
think
to
that
me.
Jets game, it's so important that you get off and you get some momentum and you get that inertia going. That Jets game, I think the hangover effect from that, I know they had a week to forget about it and all of that stuff, but I mean, that is the one loss that just will never be able to be explained. And I think the carryover effect, it wasn't just an L, it was how they did it. It was this 2-minute meltdown that was so improbable it hasn't happened in thousands of games. And the last team to do it was the Browns. I just feel like that was a body blow and a shot to the face.
Yeah.
All at
And
once.
to that point, Jay, I think it's not only the meltdown, it's that, in hindsight, and I've been very honest about this. I was on the field. I didn't think it. I was standing right next to Nick Chubb when he scored that touchdown with 1:55 left. I wasn't thinking at the time, oh my gosh, go out of bounds. But how much have we talked about this since then?
Right.
That had he just gone out of bounds right there, or taken the knee or come down before the end zone, that game is won. So it's not just that they fell apart, but literally, mentally, had they just been a little bit more alert, then that could have been that right there.
And who knows
I don't
how
know.
the season unfolds differently.
It is funny how
Exactly.
things like that still-
What kind of a psychological? I'm sorry. What kind of a psychological difference does that make for the team if they win that game, whether they lose the game? I've always tried to stress what I think is the importance of the psychological effect on these kids losing, the mentality of the losing, the history of the losing with the Browns and stuff here, and how that can really infect a locker room right now. And that's one of my concerns moving as we close out this year.
Look at the Vikings.
But
Yeah.
it's so...
The Vikings rolled that momentum in a positive
Yep,
way.
they did.
It's so interesting you say that, because all the most successful coaches tell you that they've been really, really good at getting their team to go 1-0, to think of each week as a separate season, every single cliche that we've ever heard. And yet, when we sit on this side, we know how hard it is. What is that line from Socrates? It's something about not living in the past, but focusing your energy on what is new. And it's kind of that same idea. There's nothing that can be done about week 2. So having a hangover from week 2 at this point just seems mindless and stupid, and, jabbing yourself in the foot yourself or whatever. Sure. But that is sort of human nature. What if, what could have been, what should have been. Again, though, the best coaches, they put that behind, they get their team to say, okay, flush it, move on. This is a new week. And yet still also harness some sort of momentum from a positive performance. And I think that, to me, this weekend, I think the Dolphins are really, really good. I saw them in person up in Detroit to a second game back after he was out. I will be on the Dolphins sideline Thanksgiving weekend. I think the number is at the last 13 games or the last 14 games that Tua has started and finished. The Dolphins are 13-1. I think he's playing at an absolutely elite level. I think that Mike McDaniel is doing wonderful things with him. Having said that, the Browns played an exceptional game Monday night against the Bengals. So I think it was fair. I think it was reasonable to expect a better performance, more fight, more of a challenge against the Dolphins this past weekend. And it's just, you look at those numbers, and as good as Tua is, isn't this supposed to be a great defense?
Yeah.
Yeah,
I know,
allegedly. That's what we were told.
We got hoodwinked.
Yeah.
Hey, we only have a minute or
Bamboozled.
two, but I really want to get your thoughts on Jeff Saturday. We've discussed the whole thing last week and then the improbable win on Sunday and this week. And some people have had some really strong thoughts on it, from Joe Thomas to Bill Cowher. What's your general observation of what the Colts have done and how this sort of out-of-the-box experiment is going?
You know, it's interesting because my former colleague, Jim Trotter, apparently was very good friends with Jeff and wrote a column. And he said that he asked Jeff, you've very openly talked about meritocracy and paying your dues and earning your way. And yet here you openly leapfrogged however many people and jumped into this role when you yourself were unwilling. As we know, Jeff Saturday was unwilling to accept assistant coach jobs over the last few years. And so Jim Trotter said that he essentially called out Jeff Saturday on, why did you always talk this talk? But then all of a sudden when it was your turn, you said, oh yeah, sure, push me to the front of the line. And Jeff Saturday's response to Jim Trotter was that we've seen this in the NBA, where a player goes straight from playing to being the head person. We've seen this in Major League Baseball, where a player like Aaron Boone goes straight from playing to being a manager. And why don't we ever see it in the NFL? And Jeff Saturday's argument was that while a player may not be an X and O genius, being the leader of a team, being the CEO of a team, may have a lot more to do with leadership ability and having lived that experience than perhaps paying your dues as a high school coach and then as a college assistant and then as a college coordinator and so forth. He felt that it was important to show that it could indeed be done. And he said he wanted to shoulder that I can create a new path. I think it's interesting. I think it's notable, especially, and I brought this up with all of you, that, Josh McCown took so much heat a few years ago when it was known that the Texans wanted to hire him similarly, and he sort of pulled himself back. I think when Bill Cowher spoke, it made me feel very much as a writer. I covered high school football in the wilds of Texas and drove hours to write copy in a newsroom. I covered college football in New Jersey. I then went on to write at a newspaper covering the NFL. I then paid my dues in television. I felt like I sort of followed this path, and to see people kind of leapfrog all of that for whatever reason, sure, that's tough. But I think there's something to be said for valuing different experiences. And I think that that's what Jeff Saturday was saying in his response to Jim Trotter, that there may be a linear path, but in the NFL, we've not always been really good at recognizing, acknowledging that linear path, right? Because there are other issues with who often gets the opportunity, whether they've paid their dues or not. For instance, like an Eric Bieniemy or like a Leslie Frazier. Certain people have paid their dues and they're still not getting a chance. So now here's a guy that comes completely outside the box, a completely different path. If he is successful, then what he is essentially arguing is maybe it's opening more eyes that there can indeed be more thinking outside of the box. Maybe not that same thinking outside of the box, but multiple different thinking outside of the boxes.
I agree. Yeah,
there's something to that, right?
It seems
Personally,
elitist to think that there's only one
I'll
way.
Say this, though. I'm frustrated that Frank Reich had to move away from Matt Ryan because, as you know, I was on the sideline for the game before, the game in Tennessee. The way that Frank Reich spoke about Matt Ryan, the way that Matt Ryan spoke about Frank Reich, there was no doubt the esteem and the respect that those men had for each other, what they felt that they could accomplish if given the chance. We know that Matt Ryan ultimately lost his job not because Frank Reich wanted him to lose his job, but because that was a decision made by ownership. All of a sudden, Jeff Saturday gets to come back in and reinstall Matt Ryan. Right. I was very happy to see Matt Ryan win, that's for sure. But it makes you wonder, why couldn't Frank Reich have the juice to play with the quarterback he wanted to play with?
Yeah, it's almost like Irsay wanted to make the change. He went ahead and made it, and he's been very unapologetic about it. But I know a lot of folks are watching it. Hell, there's different paths in every profession, and Bull brought up a good point earlier in the show. How many broadcasters did Bill Cowher leapfrog when he went right to the top of his new profession? I'm sure there were a lot of people that have been paying their dues, doing games, that were former coaches that would have loved a chance to sit in that studio. But he got that opportunity because he was tremendous at his job. Well, Jeff Saturday was tremendous at his job. He was a very, very elite football player. It's not like he's coming from the basketball world or from the business world. This has been his life, his entire life. And he played with Peyton Manning. I think the rub-off factor on that, Peyton speaks of Jeff in high regard. And I worked with Jeff for a number of years. Jeff is a great guy. And you know what? At the end of the day, if he can lead men, and he did it on Sunday, I'm not saying he can do it long term, but in the short sample size, he was able to get it done. Let's see what happens as time goes on. The NFL is caught up too much in doing things the way everybody else does it anyway. Think
True.
outside
And
the
Jay,
box.
one other thing is that every time and place is different. And we never know who is the right person to cover what story in one moment. Similarly, we heard Jonathan Taylor talk about Jeff Saturday's passion for the organization, Jeff Saturday's passion for what is served in the cafeteria, Jeff Saturday's intimate awareness of how the equipment room works and what is necessary to get players in the best position to play. So maybe right now, this was a club, this was an organization that needed to feel, hey, the Indianapolis Colts once stood for something, once meant something, once were the elite of the elite, and wearing that horseshoe meant something. Maybe that's what this outfit needed right now. Maybe 3 years ago they didn't, maybe 2 years from now they don't, but in this moment, what Jonathan Taylor said was that's what resonated the most. And so, maybe that's it. Maybe Jim Irsay happened upon what his club actually really needs in this moment, and that's that.
Fascinating
I think
experiment.
it's so easy for all of us to have hot takes. I think it's so easy for us to say, oh, you hired that person, or this person's getting that chance. I mean,
I agree.
That's the nature of what we do, sure.
It was low-hanging fruit. I thought it was unfair to Jeff, and I'm pulling for him. It's going to be a fun experiment to see how it works out. Aditi, thank you very much. Where are you this weekend?
Actually, I think that I'm home.
Wow.
Which is sort of crazy.
Nice.
Yeah.
Enjoy the week off.
I'm buying you a Yankee candle for the holidays, just so you know, and I'm sending it to your
Can't
place.
wait.
Like 6 of them.
I'm buying her a fake candle.
Yep. So.
That I won't light, and it'll make everybody happy.
Thanks, Aditi.
Bye, guys.
Bye, Aditi.